and I'll read it out. So yeah, moving on to my second story, one of the interesting things we have now is the fact that after the pandemic, the cinema attendance has never been the same. And it has been that bad to the extent that it looks like now more than ever, there's still continuous decline of cinema attendance, not just in Africa, but the world over. Everywhere you check, you realize that a lot of people, some section of the cinema going audience have never returned to the cinema as of now. And others have chosen not to even get back on the bandwagon due to several reasons. However, in Africa, to be specific, South Africa, it looks like they are not relenting on the issue of giving up on the cinema going culture, regardless of how economical a challenge that may be. Cinema going audience are still very much into the communal experience. And just as I've been saying, in as much as there's been, the advent of streaming services has come to help filmmakers in general, it still has, impacted one way or the other quite negatively on the cinema going audience, because what it means is that now you have the option to stay at home or be wherever and watch films on your phones or whatever platform or medium or device. And that has indeed impacted the cinema industry. I mean, to an extent, it has really affected the cinema going industry, because with just, perhaps the price of a ticket, you could subscribe to, a streaming service for a month, and you have so many movies available to you that you can watch from morning till evening without, a stop. As to whether that will be the kind of movie you really want to watch, that is also left to be debated. But regardless, the streaming services have provided an avenue for people to have, quote unquote, a relatively cheaper and affordable option to the cinema going experience. However, one thing you can never take away from the cinema going experience is the fact that it is a communal experience, just as you have in sports and going to, the night out or whichever way. There is a communal experience you can never take away from attending the cinemas. And that is what the South African audience are participating in, unrelentlessly, which is a good thing for cinema, particularly in that region of Africa. And it is my hope that it will be quite spread throughout Africa. And we need that, because for the industry we find ourselves in, one of the main veins where filmmakers make their monies back is through the cinemas, and you cannot rule that out. The streaming services will give some amount of money, yes, to the movies they curate, or buy the licenses to be on their platform. But beyond that, it may not be enough to sometimes even recoup the money, let alone make enough profit to be able to make your next movie if you're a filmmaker or producer. So that is also quite a challenge for filmmakers. However, the cinemas, if well organized and whatever movie is being done is promoted well, it brings a lot of people back to the cinemas to watch the film. And it looks like without particular titles, it makes it difficult for people to return to the cinema. However, with a combination of offers and cinematic titles, a lot of people in South Africa are still attending cinemas, and that is great news, because recently a number of cinemas are closing down because of poor attendance. And if you ever understand the business of theater or cinema, where they make most of their money is not even the ticket sales, because we are looking at they splitting the cost of the profit, not just with the filmmakers, but the studio they are promoting the films themselves. So it means that if they are even taking the profit and it's split into 3 parts, they are only entitled to 1/3. And most often, I'm sure there are ways they go about it. That will be, either recouping the profit after the production cost, or one way or the other. There's a calculation that makes it possible. But most of those monies are never enough to keep the cinemas or multiplexes afloat. So one of the ways they keep themselves afloat is the confectionaries they sell, from the popcorns and the drinks and the candies. Those are the things that really keep them afloat. And without people going to the cinemas, it will be next to impossible for them to sustain that business they have. And so that is quite a challenge that they are faced with almost with about 60% of the South African demographics of the cinema going audience still very prevalent in the cinema going experience. It does speak well of a very buoyant South African film industry or cinema industry. And that is a good thing to hear, that at least in a part of Africa, cinema is crucial to their industry, and that is a good thing to hear. It is something that is also predicated on whether audiences like the cinema experience more than just watching films on their phones through the streaming platforms. And one of the things I discovered quite recently was the fact that the Gen Alphas, those who were born particularly from the year 2013 till now, they prefer the cinema going experience compared to the Gen Alphas and the millennials and the baby boomers and others. In terms of percentage wise, they rank around the 60s, whereas the others are, from around 47 to around 30 something. But the Gen Alphas are really so engrossed in going to the cinemas compared to the other generations. And that speaks to a decline to how far a lot of cinema going audiences have, due to so many reasons aside the pandemic, have stepped back from going to the cinemas. And that is indeed a challenge. But thankfully, South Africa is holding the fort for positioning themselves as a vital community hub for the cinema going audiences. And whether the cinema business will ever recover fully from the pandemic, that is left to be seen. But as it stands now, it looks like South Africa is, you can tell the health of an industry based on the market the market being very profitable. And it looks like the cinema going audience is thriving well, regardless of the fact that other cinema, multiplexes are closing down. So it is a good thing, and I'm hoping it's something that would, grow in all parts of Africa, in all other industries, even from Ghana and so forth. But all is also dependent on the film titles that are available. And this also means that whatever films are being produced have to be of top-notch quality and must also have the leverage of a popcorn vibe to reel people in. That is why a lot of big, studios would invest lots of money into like their superhero films or war films, and promote it on a massive scale just to reel in people. And you also have a lot of people who love thrillers or horror films, and so a lot of big studios would rather invest in those ones to draw people in, and that becomes quite a challenge for the indie films who have small budgets and may not have the leverage as the big studios to promote these films on a larger scale to bring them in. So hopefully this is a habit we are hoping it spreads through Africa, and with the hope that would make an impact on the African market for it to thrive, the film industries to thrive. So let me know what you think. What can other markets learn from what South Africa is doing now, in terms of their cinema going audiences? Whatever your thoughts may be, can you leave them in the